Are we as far along as Satoshi Nakamoto thought we would be at this point?
Bitcoin is kind of a binary outcome. Either it works tremendously well, or it probably doesn't work very much at all. It eventually stagnates and dies. But I do think in 7 years, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do think Bitcoin could be another 10x here in terms of market capitalization, transaction volumes, overall adoption. I don't think another order of magnitude would be off the table in that time frame, and I think that'd be considered very successful for that time frame.
Renowned macro analyst and investment strategist Lyn Alden remains one of the most vocal and bullish investors in the Bitcoin space. In her latest interview with Kitco News, Alden discusses her short and long-term predictions for Bitcoin, which she predicts could be at least 10 times larger in market capitalization, trading volumes, and adoption within the next 7 years. According to the renowned analyst, it's no news that the world is drawing much closer to the end of the current debt-based monetary system. This means more and more countries will be on the lookout for a suitable replacement, preferably a monetary system without the many weaknesses of the present fiat system. At the moment, countries experiencing high inflation and total currency debasement fall back on stronger currencies like the United States dollar. We've seen this in Egypt, Lebanon, Venezuela, Argentina, and Zimbabwe. When local weaker fiat currencies lose value so rapidly, citizens can no longer save in those currencies and instead turn to the US dollar or other stronger currencies. An example is the rapid dollarization of prices that occurred in Venezuela earlier this year when the Lebanese pound was trading at 100,000 against the greenback on the parallel market. At the time, the currency was officially pegged at 15,000 to the dollar, which is still a very far cry from the 2019 market exchange rate of 1507 Lebanese pounds to the dollar. But the dollar is currently having a fair share of its problems at the moment, with the rapidly decreasing demand for U.S. treasuries and the Treasury Department's need to create trillions of dollars in debt-based securities within the next few months. Experts are worried that there would have to be a significant and rapid increase in yields to attract buyers. Most buyers of these bonds are local investors, which means more money will be recirculated back into the economy at a time when inflation is almost out of the Fed's control. This is why Alden believes everyone, including U.S. investors, will soon be taking shelter in the only other viable option, which is Bitcoin. As we bring you clips from Alden's fascinating discussion with Kitco's Michelle McCory, please ensure you watch the video to the end so you don't miss her 10x price prediction for Bitcoin and the time frame for this impressively bullish prediction. Also, ensure you subscribe to the channel if you are yet to do so, turn on the notifications, and smash the like button so the video gets to more viewers. Thanks and enjoy the video.
The way that markets work in terms of money, especially on the global scale, is that, over time, people want to get out of weaker monies as they can. And if there's all this kind of fencing that kind of keeps them in, but technology is a way to kind of break through that. And so it's when we see kind of these countries fail, like these currencies fail, they generally don't return to the gold standard. They if anything, they dollarize. Mm-hmm. That's usually their go-to. And so we generally see that as developing countries have currency problems, the developing currencies kind of get inroads in there. And the big question is what happens when eventually these major developed currencies fail or begin to have their kind of ongoing inflationary spiral in a similar way you see in emerging markets. So basically when their debt levels get so high, when their interest expense is completely untenable, when we have a energy shortage, for example, and you see kind of just money printing from these central banks, what happens then? What is the apex predator asset that comes after them? In a similar way that the dollar comes after Argentina, comes after Lebanon, what comes after these major currencies when they eventually start to have problems? And really the only two options, I think, are gold or Bitcoin. In a world where Bitcoin was never invented, gold would be the only possible fallback mechanism to recapitalize the system, reset, and unfortunately probably build the whole system again. You probably would fractional reserve gold again and kind of repeat this cycle over another century. I don't know. Bitcoin presents another path we can take, and the question becomes, will Bitcoin remain secure and decentralized enough to kind of hold that burden? It's scarcer than gold in the sense that as lower terminal supply, so eventually zero inflation, compared to gold's on average 1.5% inflation per year. Bitcoin is also portable, so you can bring it around the world with you. You can memorize 12 words, and you can bring all of your Bitcoin with you. Whereas if you try to bring dollars or gold through an airport, you're going to be pretty restricted in how much you can legally bring through and practically bring through. And so that portability and that extra scarceness gives it a really powerful advantage. But of course, it is reliant on the global telecommunication system. It is reliant on being able to survive against potential attacks or bugs. And so it's, we're still less than 15 years into Bitcoin's existence. And I think every kind of cycle it goes through is another test to see how resilient it is. And to the extent that if Bitcoin does not break, if Bitcoin cannot be captured or defeated in some way, I would expect it to continue capturing market share. And then should whatever reason it fail, gold is still a fallback option. It's something that, the power goes out and you have gold, you still have your own bare asset money. So I still think gold has a role even in a Bitcoin future. And the main question between gold or Bitcoin comes down to, can someone figure out, can nation states break Bitcoin? Can someone try to find a way to break Bitcoin? Will Bitcoin ever fall from its own incentive structure? Like will it ever kind of centralize in a way that damages it? And if not, I think it continues taking market share. In a world where Bitcoin is successful, large institutions are going to own chunks of it. That's eventually even central banks would own significant.
We have a Bitcoin standard.
Exactly, and so over time, I think it's one of those things. If any one entity were to own, say, 20% of Bitcoin, I'd find that very concerning because if there were kind of attempts at forks and things like that, they'd have a lot of pricing power to help determine which fork can win. But if an entity has a few percentage of the Bitcoin network, I don't view that as an attack on Bitcoin. In general, an asset that is, the scarcer an asset is and the faster it can be withdrawn, the harder it is to build large paper markets over it, right? So one of the challenges with gold is that as scarce and attractive as it is, the portability is limiting, the divisibility, the verification is limiting. And so historically what happens is people want to hold their gold in vaults and then it gets fraction reserved and rehypothecated. And that eventually breaks after decades. Eventually entities like China or India just kind of keep taking the gold and eventually things break. Yeah. But that's like usually a multi-decade process. Whereas if you have something like Bitcoin that can be withdrawn quicker, every 10 minutes on average, the entire network is audited by the node network. You can bring Bitcoin out. It grows more slowly. It has zero terminal inflation. That shrugs off attempts at rehypothecation and fractional reserve more quickly. The cycle's years instead of decades.
The only thing that can stop the transition to a more secure Bitcoin standard, according to Alden, is if someone finds a way to break the network's fundamentals. It's already been established that that's next to impossible. Alden says she's also worried about mining pools, but the risk there, if someone decides to go rogue, will be relatively short-lived as miners can easily decide to redirect their hash rate to another mining pool to bring back sanity. As a Bitcoin investor enthusiast, Alden says it's also important to reduce the amount of hash rate and mining activities controlled by each region of the world. This is a valid concern when you consider how much effect, however short-lived, the Chinese mining ban had on the industry. At the moment, that position has shifted to North America, and Alden says it's important we have more global diffusion of the hash rate. During a discussion, McCory asks Alden about Bitcoin's present performance and if it is still in line with Satoshi Nakamoto's vision. In February 2010, the pseudonymous Bitcoin creator is credited to have said that in 20 years there will either be very large transaction volumes or there will be no volume at all. Satoshi's timeline ends in 2030, which is now 7 years away. Here is Alden's prediction on how much Bitcoin would have grown as an asset and as a network by 2030.
That brings up the question of, are we as far along as Satoshi Nakamoto thought we would be?
Bitcoin is kind of a binary outcome. Either it works tremendously well or it probably doesn't work very much at all. It eventually stagnates and dies. And so basically saying 20 years from now, does something kill it? Does nobody want to use it? Do people find something better? If so, then you're not going to have almost any volume, perhaps no volume. On the other hand, if Bitcoin continues to be successful, the volumes could be tremendous and the Bitcoin will be prospering in that regard. So at the 14-year mark into that, 14 years since Bitcoin's inception, 13 years since he said that, the Bitcoin network does process trillions of dollars worth of Bitcoin transaction volume. Now, a lot of that is moving between exchanges. A lot of that is people choosing to pull that into their own cold storage. Basically, you still have a lot of overall volume. It's not really yet for medium exchange purposes, but I think that's normal in this kind of early period of adoption where the price keeps going up, where there's capital gains taxes on any sale you might have. People have a natural tendency to hoard it and use it as that savings. But I think the fact that, if you were to go back to 2010 and say, this network's worth $500 billion, the current temporary Speaker of the House hosts the Bitcoin white paper on his website. He's actually a Bitcoin fan. We've had multiple presidential candidates talk about Bitcoin. We have a nation that has adopted it as its second legal tender along with the dollar. Right. And they have their own Bitcoin office. You have, the Kingdom of Bhutan was mining Bitcoin. We have some of the Middle Eastern countries getting into Bitcoin mining. We have trillions of dollars in transaction volume. Now, so I do think that we're actually quite far along in that whole vision. And when I picture 7 years from now, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do expect it will be further along. But when you kind of compare where the Bitcoin network is now, where it can go, or what the competition is, when we look at FedWire, so the Federal Reserve's base settlement system, that settles, and this is not a typo, $1 quadrillion of settlement volumes per year. It was 1.06 quadrillion. That's 1,000 trillions in gross settlement volume. So these numbers can reach extraordinarily high levels. Basically what Bitcoin is a decentralized open source FedWire for the world. And so right now it's still tiny compared to the biggest ledger, which is the dollar system, the FedWire system, the Eurodollar system built around that system. That's by far the biggest network. Bitcoin is nowhere near getting to that. And I think even in 7 years, it'll still be probably not in the same ballpark as the dollar system. But I do think in 7 years, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do think Bitcoin could be another 10x here in terms of market capitalization, transaction volumes, overall adoption. I don't think another order of magnitude would be off the table in that time frame, and I think that'd be considered very successful for that time frame.
Let us know what you think about Lyn Alden's Bitcoin predictions in the comments section below. Meanwhile, during the discussion with Matt Corey, Alden also discussed her outlook on the U.S. economy, especially in view of recent reports that the Fed funds rate could go as high as 7% in 2024. According to Alden, the Fed might announce 1 or 2 more 25 basis point hikes, but nothing too severe until they determine how much effect the previous rate hikes have had on the economy. Alden is also predicting a combination of recession and stagflation for the United States economy within the next 6 months. She believes inflation will remain sticky in some areas and that sectors, such as commercial real estate and small businesses, will suffer more consequences than the rest of the economy. But the recession will not be a very pronounced one, she predicts, adding that it will be similar to the 2001 recession. GDP won't go down very much and unemployment will only spike a little compared to other more severe recessions. But coming out of this, during the 2024-2025 liquidity cycle, Alden is predicting a significant improvement in economic and market conditions. According to the renowned analyst, this is when you want to be long a lot of things like Bitcoin. That's it for Lyn Alden's 10x Bitcoin price prediction by 2030. Don't forget to drop your comments below, subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on the notifications bell for more videos. You can also check out our other videos featuring Lyn Alden and other brilliant analysts and prominent investors. Thanks for watching.